Hey everyone, and welcome to our Q&A presented by Just Love. My name is Paula Jane and I'm talking to Judy Carroll. Judy is an internationally known author. Her books include The Zeta Message, Human by Day, Zeta by Night, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, and her two most recent books, both of them Kindle editions, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET, and Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness from an Off-Planet Perspective. Hi Judy.
Hi Paula, hi everyone.
Recently we've been discussing Judy's book, Cosmic Spirituality, A Blending of Religion and Science in Oneness. And so far we have looked at the understanding that humans are, in reality, immortal soul essences, which has led to a discussion on reincarnation and most recently a conversation around the in-between or subspace, as it is sometimes referred to. This discussion on the in-between or subspace is relevant to what's going on right now, and what's also significant right now is knowing our origins. Knowing where we came from is helpful in trying to navigate what's happening on our planet right now. Knowing that we've always been controlled will help us to break through the veil that has been placed over us for millennia. It truly is time for us to wake up. So today we wanted to go back to something that Judy has written about in her Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth book, and that is to do with a place in Australia being known as the Garden of Eden, and how there are still many drawings in caves today that tell this story. So Judy, can you share some of those stories with us?
Yes, Paul, I'd love to. I've written about this subject quite extensively in my ET Presence on Earth book in chapter 14, starting on page 107. I've visited 4 very sacred Indigenous sites here in Australia: Uluru and Kata Tjuta in Central Australia, Wollumbin, which is just south of the Queensland-New South Wales border, and Kariong, which is north of Sydney in New South Wales. The Indigenous people of Australia have a history going back way beyond 50,000 years, and for those of you who've seen their depictions of what they call the Wandjina, which are highly respected creator beings in their folklore, the resemblance to the Greys is very obvious. Many of them also feel a close connection with the Pleiades, so there's a strong off-planet connection there as well.
So they feel a close connection with the Pleiades because the Pleiadians were involved with their creation, or at least their upgrading. The Greys, or ant people as they were back then, also assisted alongside the various off-planet beings who stepped in to help the human-animal mixtures who were being used as slaves by the Repterans.
Yes, as author Valerie Barrow describes in her book entitled Al-Chiringa, When the First Ancestors Were Created, part of which I've included in my ET Presence on Earth book, when the galactic hierarchy saw what was happening down here, with the Repterans and Anunnaki using the half-human, half-primate mixture species they'd created as slaves, they decided to intervene. A large ship carrying a mixed crew of Pleiadians and Lyrans was sent here to try to stop what was going on. Their job was to begin a genetic upgrading process to bring the mixtures more fully into the human kingdom, to put a stop to the exploitation and cruelty. This ship was shot at with laser weaponry and brought down, killing many on board except for a small group who managed to escape in a rescue pod.
So they were shot at using laser weaponry. Interesting that laser weaponry has been around forever. Was the laser weaponry created on Earth by the Repterans, or was it from the stars or some other dimension?
It was from right here on Earth. The Repterans had highly advanced technology even back then. All of the seeming contact with God described in the Old Testament was actually either Repterans or off-planet technology being used to control or else assist the young human species.
That's right. You talk about that in your ET Presence on Earth book.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to your story. So the rescue mission got shot down.
Yes, but a small group of survivors were able to escape in a rescue pod, which crash-landed off the coast of what is now New South Wales, Australia. Some were injured, and it was a struggle for all of them to survive in the harsh climate. But they were assisted by the ant people, who had an underground colony in the area. The ant people were an insectoid human species native to Earth, and an early grey culture who had also come under attack by the Repterans and had retreated underground for protection. Needless to say, they were very relieved to see a rescue party and did all they could to help. When Helene and I visited Kariong in October 2016, both of us had very strong flashbacks. Helene had been one of the Lyrans and I was one of the ant people who took the off-planet people underground into the coolness and shelter of our burrows, where we tended their injuries and gave them shelter. We also assisted them with their genetic work as we had the necessary equipment that they'd lost when their ship crashed.
So the technologies that the ant people had allowed the Pleiadians and the Lyrans to get back to their home planet?
No, the technology was used for the genetic work required to upgrade the mixtures. The ant people were expert geneticists. Most of the Pleiadian technology needed to carry out the work was lost when the mothership crashed. Other Pleiadians, Lyrans and Syrians arrived later to get the original mission home.
Oh, okay.
The human species that was subsequently developed from this upgrade program went on to become the indigenous people of Australia. So much spiritual knowledge was passed on to them by the star people that around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, Egyptians came to Kariong on pilgrimages to learn from them and to pay honour and respect to this original place of learning and wisdom.
Egyptians came to Australia to learn from Australians and to pay respect?
Yes, believe it or not. The gold used in Tutankhamun's tomb was actually carried an Australian signature and was sourced at Ballarat in central Victoria. A dozen wooden boomerangs with Australian Aboriginal patterns were also found in his tomb.
That's really interesting. Is that something that's well known?
No way. It's hardly acknowledged by mainstream researchers and archaeologists. A book entitled Ancient Aliens in Australia, Pleiadian Origins of Humanity, by author-researchers Stephen and Evan Strong tells the story, with many illustrations. The first part of this book is great, but the second part, in which two other co-authors take over, is not so good and moves away from the subject. But to get back to our story, there's a canyon at Kariong that runs between two rock walls. On one wall, Egyptian hieroglyphs are still in existence, and on the other wall are Pleiadian hieroglyphs depicting the story of the survivors of the ship that crashed just offshore. These hieroglyphs are incredibly ancient and are only in a reasonable state of preservation because the canyon was originally a cave with a roof over it, which gave protection from the weather. The roof eventually collapsed. It was this Pleiadian group, helped by the ant people based underground on Earth, who were responsible for assisting the earlier mixture race to evolve fully into the human kingdom. Funnily enough, there's even an area in Central Australia known as the Garden of Eden. I think the two sites are linked by tunnels. They're certainly connected energetically. Helene and I went to Kariong with an Aboriginal trained guide, so we heard firsthand the amazing stories that have been passed down over generations by the original caretakers of this land. It was a real coming home for us. We were guided through a brief ceremony at each place we stopped to ask permission of the guardian spirits for us to enter. The energy was absolutely incredible, and Helene even managed to capture the image of an energy vortex on her phone camera.
Wow, maybe we can share that image.
Yes, it is featured in our ET Presence book, along with some other pics. It's incredible what can be accidentally captured with digital photography. This guide later sent us a copy of a photo that had been taken by another tour group. On it, an Aboriginal spear in rainbow colours appeared on the developed print. It is not a trick of the light or anything that's been photoshopped. Our guide was there when it was taken and knows that it's genuine. It's clearly a spear, no mistakes. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Interesting. So, Judy, you also write in your Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth book about the significance of Atlantis and Lemuria with regards to Australia.
Yes, Paula. Australia was part of Lemuria, which I've always felt a connection with. As far as I understand, Lemuria was yin to Atlantis' yang energy. I've never felt any connection with Atlantis, whereas Lemuria has drawn me since early childhood. It was much more nature-oriented, whereas Atlantis was technologically oriented and very similar to what's going on now.
So you feel that connection to Lemuria now as you, Judy. Did you feel that connection as an ant person as well?
Oh yes, for sure. And as for Atlantis and predictions being made about it, as the famous psychic Edgar Cayce predicted, Atlantis has indeed risen again. People misinterpreted this prophecy as a physical landmass rising up out of the ocean. But that's not how it happens, just as we don't physically rise from the dead. It's the Atlantean spirit that has resurrected or reincarnated. Some of those ones involved back in the old Atlantis have now learned better ways, but some have not. So we have the whole controlling scenario playing out again.
Here we go again. Interesting. You write about the Reptarian group in Atlantis when they first began using crystals as a means of reprogramming those people who were considered to be uncooperative or enemies of the state. This included anybody who didn't support them in their bid to take over the planet. This type of system that they set up could be compared to modern-day dictatorships, complete with torture techniques used on uncooperative citizens. Once they mastered the art of realigning human energy systems, they then began experimenting on the planetary energy grid. It was this experimentation gone wrong that caused the demise of Atlantis. All sounds a little too close to home, hey? Mm-hmm. Just keeping in mind, though, that you go on to say that the off-planet councils would step in if human free will becomes a threat to other races or parts of the universe. Until that happens, we will have to allow free will to play out.
Yes, this pertains to what I referred to in the last question of Atlantis rising again. It's in full swing right now and has been on the rise for some decades. So much negativity and control happened back then that has never been resolved, and it now needs to be as part of the planetary shift. It was events at the time of Atlantis that caused a major fall in vibrational frequency. So now, as we face a shift upwards, the time has come to deal with it karmically. This is why some people are more aware of the insidious control playing out than others. Some of us have been there, done that in the past. Back in Atlantis, crystals were used to reprogram and control people. Now other means are being used to manipulate people's DNA. I had a very unpleasant experience a few years ago with somebody using crystals on me to do a chakra balance. At the time, I got a momentary flashback of being held down by force and crystals placed on my body to cause harm. This was from the past life. But the next thing was, in this life, the room started spinning and I nearly passed out. Luckily, the person doing it knew enough to push grounding crystals into my hands. It took a while before I could even sit up, and I felt really off for several days after. Very interesting experience that taught me a lot. Maybe I was one of the ones in Atlantis playing around with crystal energy and some karma needed balancing. Who knows?
Who knows? So given everything that you've just spoken about, do you think that Australia has some part to play with what's happening here on the planet?
Yes, I think so. I do know that our little group very specifically chose to be reborn here in Australia this time around. My feeling is that the old Lemurian spirit will make a comeback here.
So we've been talking about the Reptarians quite a bit recently, and really throughout the entire Just Love series. And I think it's important now, with everything that's going on, to be fully aware that we are all one, including the Reptarians. Can you talk us through this?
Yes, definitely. The bottom line is choosing between love and fear, so both options need to be presented to us in order for us to be able to make that choice.
So we ourselves still carry some of the Reptarian consciousness left on the planet, and that is what we are alchemizing now. As within, so without. That is in our body. We are all one, so we need to come back within and reset. Alchemize what is in our own body.
Yes, we certainly do still have that primitive little reptilian bit in our brain that we've inherited from our earlier forebears. Science acknowledges this fully.
Yeah, so the best way to navigate our way forward in this situation, and in fact in any situation really, is to bring it back inside. We need to go within and be aware of our own Reptarian consciousness that is buried within us.
Yes, it's the most primitive part of the human brain that needs to be healed and balanced and alchemised from fear into love.
Yeah, so acknowledge what you have now, not what you don't have. Appreciate what you have and allow the next steps to play out.
Yes, Paula, this is the thing. It's so easy to automatically fall back into that primitive herd instinct of fear, aggression and separateness as opposed to oneness. when we're faced with challenges. It's a deep instinctual thing that we still carry over from the past.
Yeah. So regarding the ascension process, there is something that I want to conclude with, and it's something that you wrote, Judy, back in 2011 when you were writing your ET Presence on Earth book, keeping in mind that the life we were living in 2011 looked very different from the life we are living today. So today these words are even more significant, and it says, "Love raises our frequency and fear lowers it. This is the reason why the controllers continually brainwash humanity with their ongoing fear campaign to keep people trapped down here and unable to evolve to a higher energy frequency. Becoming aware or waking up, as ETs often say to contactees, and thus breaking through this fear barrier is the key to ascension. Fear is harmful, love is harmless, and love expresses through oneness, acceptance, tolerance, and respect for others, regardless of their viewpoint, beliefs, and culture. Our return home to God must embrace our return to our true state of oneness with all life. Acknowledging this and learning to think in terms of oneness and acceptance rather than in terms of separation and divisiveness is the key to a quicker and easy journey home."
Yep, this is what Upstairs keeps reminding us about over and over again, learning to think in terms of oneness and accord rather than in separation and conflict is the bottom line of spiritual evolution for all of us.
Yeah, it certainly is the bottom line and an essential understanding for all of humanity. So if you want to read more about all of this, I'd just like to remind you that Judy's books are available from Amazon, or you can go directly through Judy's website, which is included in the link below. If you like this video, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, sending you all so much love and thank you all for listening. Bye for now.